Over the years I've been doing a lot of woodworking, but I'm just starting to get into metalworking and setting up a little metalworking shop in my basement. And one of the things that I had to contend with is what was I going to do to cut the metal that I needed to weld. I'm just trying to do basic fabrication of like furniture frames and stuff like that. I want to mix metal and wood into some new furniture designs. So as I thought about what kinds of options are available to me for cutting metal, really there are three major types of metal cutting saws out there. There's an abrasive saw with a consumable abrasive blade. It throws a lot of sparks. An abrasive saw is basically very loud. The blade is flexible so you don't get a very accurate cut, and it throws a lot of sparks, like a lot of sparks. It looks like fireworks. At the opposite end of the spectrum is a bandsaw, right? So they make these metal cutting bandsaws that drop down on material, and you actually don't need to watch them. They just sort of cut through the material on their own. They don't make any sparks at all. They can cut very large pieces at different angles. They make very precise cuts, but they're pretty slow. So, you know, I'm somebody who doesn't have a lot of time on my hands, but I do like the idea that the bandsaw does not throw a lot of sparks. So as I continue to debate whether I should get an abrasive saw or a bandsaw, I discovered a new kind of saw that I didn't know existed. I thought I knew a lot about tools, but I'm in a new arena here and I didn't know. And it's called a dry saw, or a dry cut saw, sometimes called a cold saw. And this is an example of one. It looks a lot like a traditional abrasive chop saw or a traditional chop saw that you might see in woodworking, but the blade is designed so that it's a carbide blade, but it's designed to cut metal quickly and with essentially no sparks, just a couple sparks when you start up, but not much spark after that. And it also does this in a way that makes very clean cuts that don't get melted and they don't get a lot of burr on them. And because the cuts are so clean, also or the way the saw cuts, it's called a cold cutting saw because when you pull the part out of the saw, it's not hot from friction with the blade, which is not true of an abrasive saw. And I can't really speak to a metal cutting bandsaw, but those generate a lot of friction, so I would imagine there's some heat there too. So cold cutting saw or dry cut saw is what those are called. I looked around at them. They range for about $500, typically about $500 for a brand like DeWalt or Makita. A lot of them are 15 inches in size, which is big, gives you a nice big radius to cut large amounts of pipe or large pipes. I don't really need that capacity. So as I was looking around, I came across this saw, which is a Skil SPT62MTC. That's a mouthful right there, okay? And here's the thing is I actually don't really have a lot of faith in the Skil brand. Unless you're looking at a 40-year-old worm drive SKILSAW, the original, I haven't found that they've made a lot of nice tools since that heyday so long ago. But reading the reviews of this saw, a lot of people were going out of their way to say, hey, I would never buy a SKILSAW or Skil branded tool, but this is a really nice tool. So it was also inexpensive. It's a little smaller. It has a 12-inch blade, which is more than enough capacity for me. And it's light. It's 38 pounds versus about 50 for a typical saw, or a typical dry cut saw. So I took a risk on it and I just unboxed it. And it's actually really quite a well-built piece of equipment, and I wanted to walk you through like a close-up of it because it seems like a lot of people are discovering this saw, and there aren't a lot of like really close visuals or reviews of it that I could find. So that's what I'm trying to do, is show you something that maybe you couldn't find elsewhere on YouTube. So I'm going to pick up the camera and give you like a really nice close guided tour of this saw, the Skil SPT62MTC, cold cut or dry cut metal cutting saw. Okay, here we go. So on this side of the saw, you can see that there's a big blade guard. This is in its compacted position. So let me lift this up. Okay. So as you can see, this actually has a full blade guard. There's no exposed teeth here at all, which is really, really nice. You don't see that a lot on any kind of saw. And it's metal. This is all metal construction here. This is not plastic. There's very few plastic pieces on the saw, and like, you know, one of the reviewers on Amazon said, it's like they went out of their way to make a really nice tool here. So, so as you bring the saw down, of course, the guard lifts to expose the blade. The blade is, I'm assuming it's made by Freud because it has some of Freud's proprietary little cutouts and things on it. It just looks like a Freud blade, which is cool. But it's basically, I guess, the angle of these teeth, of these carbide teeth, is what makes a big difference on things. Cast aluminum base here. There are mounting points on opposite corners. They're not in all four corners, but just on opposite corners. And then, I don't know if you can see right here, this is a chip collection duct. So when you're cutting through, in theory, the chips should go into this little port. And actually, that comes out of the back there, which is, I don't know how well that's going to work. But again, it's nicely made. And even this is a steel part with a rubber handle on it. You know, this is really well put together, well constructed. Feels nice. There's a spring in here to retain it, so it sits in there nicely. So if we look around at the other side of the saw, you know, we've got a really heavy cord here, which is quite nice. Polarized plug, but this is all nicely molded and nicely put together. This is the pin for locking down the top of the saw here, so you can move it for transport. And it does have a handle on the top for transport, which is nice. And the saw weighs 38 pounds, so it is luggable. In terms of the outside covering, this red piece is plastic, and this motor housing is plastic, but everything else is metal. It's really nicely made. You do have a shield right here to shield you from the cut. It's a nice touch, nice safety touch. And then this is the arbor lock here for stopping the blade from rotating. You just push that in while you spin the blade and it locks it. They give you an onboard hex wrench for changing the blade. I do like it when they give me onboard tools, and it stores right there on the side. And then there's a few nice features associated with the work holding here. So first of all, it has one of these traditional, you know, screw clamps to hold your work tight, and you always want to do that when you're cutting metal. And it has a quick release, so you can move this in and out very quickly, very easily. And then once you're ready with what you want to clamp, you flip that release down and it'll get tight. So that works really nicely. This is on a pivoting, you know, there's a pivoting fence here, so you can do miters with this. It only miters in one direction, but that's fine, you know. It should work just fine. And there is a movable, adjustable point here for the stamped metal, or rather cast metal graduation marks in there. So you can tune that and calibrate it to be just right. Another really nice little feature here is there's a little extendable table here. So there's a little thumb switch. Again, nice material, like kind of rubbery, but with like some maybe some fiberglass reinforcement in there to make it stiff. This table comes out. There's not really any wiggle in here, even at the end of its extension. It's very solid. You know, it goes in and out really nicely, and it mounts really nicely. This is just pressing a screw against the outside, so I guess over time you might have to tighten that up. But really nice design here, really well thought out tool. The base is cast aluminum. It's one solid piece, really nice, really high quality. Really comes across as a high quality tool, which I did not expect from this brand. A couple other little details that might be harder to see unless you're really focused in. This handle here is actually an ambidextrous handle. So the safety lock can go either way. You can go in here and reach down and tilt this to the right and use it, or you could go with your other hand and tilt it to the left and use it. And that's a really nice touch, and it makes it really possible to use it from both sides. Of course, the real question is, how does it cut, right? So I have just a little piece of 1x1 pipe here, or steel tube rather, and I'm just going to take a quick cut. This is the first cut with a saw right out of the box. So it's going to be really loud, and then what I'll do is after I cut it, I'll also do a cut with the lights out so that you can see how much it sparks, which is not a lot, okay? So Oh, it has soft start too, which is really that is cold to the touch. Right there. Right? No burrs. Really nice. Ready to work with right there. Okay, so let's cut that again. I'll cut a little, another little piece off. By the way, cutting such a small piece off is something that would be really impossible to do with an abrasive saw because the blade would deflect, and you, with the lack of material, it wouldn't have pressure holding it back, and the blade would deflect. So that's another reason why a dry cut saw is more useful if you're working with very small parts. Okay, so here I'm going to shut this light out a little bit, and it looks darker in here than it actually is, but still I'm keeping my hands clear. Cold. It does shoot some bits and pieces all over the place, right? It's not containing all of its waste to that little bin, but it contains a lot of it to that little bin. So if we zoom in here and look inside that little bin, you'll see I caught quite a bit of material here from those two cuts. So it's definitely doing something to catch that material, and every little bit helps. Okay, you can see there's some on the table there too, but not much. So, and there's the other side of the cut, right there, nice and clean. So, if you were looking at that skill saw and you were wondering whether it was going to be a nice tool or not, as far as I can tell, it's a very nice tool. They went out of their way to make something really high quality. Cast aluminum metal throughout, nice blade guard, nice support on the edge of the table, adjustable pointer for the miter gauge, nice clamps, everything about it. Soft start, ambidextrous D-handle grip for using your left hand or your right hand, and it cuts beautifully. So I'll run it through its paces over the weekend, make a few hundred cuts with it, and if for some reason I discover something wrong with it, I will give you an update, but I don't think I'm going to discover anything wrong with it. I think it's great. So hope that helps.